Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast. That is, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot with the Wall Street Journal here on Potomac Watch, and I'm here with Joe Sternberg and Elliot Kaufman talking about the now week-long war in the Middle East between Hamas and Israel. Let's start by listening to Secretary Austin again as he explains U.S. capabilities and backing for Israel.
Hamas attacked at a time of global challenge, but the United States is the most powerful country in the world, and we remain fully able to project power and uphold our commitments and direct resources to multiple theaters. So we will stand with Israel, even as we stand with Ukraine. The United States can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Joe Sternberg, I thought that was a very good message to send because, of course, it is a warning to Hezbollah in the north of Israel that we have the full capacity to be able to respond even with the aid we're providing to Ukraine. And it was a warning to Iran not to exploit this conflict. And if you do, the implication is there could be a price to pay. Now, the credibility of that deterrent is always a question, particularly with this administration, given what happened in Afghanistan and, frankly, what response President Biden has had to Iranian proxy attacks on Americans and American facilities over the last 2.5 years. But I like the message that Secretary Austin sent, and I wonder if it will have a deterrent effect against Hezbollah.
Well, I think that it's a very important message for America's adversaries to hear. And I also think that for a related reason, it's an important message in terms of the domestic debate on these issues in the U.S., because I've been concerned that you're starting to hear an argument in Washington, particularly among some conservatives or Republicans, that you can only do one, that if we're going to support Israel, as America has a long-standing tradition and obligation to do, we can't be wasting all of these resources on Ukraine. And I think that the key point here is that there is already a global actor who thinks that it can fight both wars at the same time, and that's Iran, because Iran is providing military support to Russia for the Ukraine war effort at the same time that Iran is supporting its proxies in this new war against Israel.
As the events unfold, there's stories, Elliot, late Thursday and Friday, that the U.S. intelligence agencies have concluded that Hezbollah is unlikely to open a second front in the north. That is reassuring, but I would suggest that they don't have a perfect record of prediction. They thought the Ukrainian war would be over in a week with Russia conquering Kyiv. They certainly didn't assist Israel, as far as we know, in anticipating Hamas's attack, and I could go through many other lists. But what do Israelis think Hezbollah is likely to do, which, of course, depends ultimately on whether Iran gives the go-ahead?
Yeah, that is the key point right there. I mean, from what they're seeing, it appears that Hezbollah would like to be seen as being involved without actually being involved. So make small attacks, tie up a lot of Israeli troops in the north, but not get into it in a full war, which would lead to what they saw in the 2006 Lebanon war, when Israel responded with force, and it took them years to recover Hezbollah. So that's what they're seeing. And if they did want to invade and sort of pile on, the logic is, well, they would have done it when Israel was in disarray in the immediate aftermath of Hamas's attack. They didn't do that. Now, they still have opportunities when the ground invasion starts, perhaps, and orders could always come down from Tehran. So no one is taking anything for granted, but Israeli troops are ready and waiting up there. And yet Israel hasn't been escalating. It's been responding in very measured ways to each individual Hezbollah attack, thinking that maybe they're on the same page here. Neither one wants the conflict to expand. Ultimately, it'll be Iran's choice.
And Hezbollah and Iran both have to think carefully about escalating because that U.S. carrier task force has been moved into the eastern Mediterranean along with some air assets elsewhere in the region. And I think Iran understands the damage that that could do to it and its militias if, in fact, they would put Israel at risk. I think, Joe, my own view is that Biden would have to come to Israel's defense if there were any kind of existential threat from Iran or Hezbollah or other actors. But let's turn to some of the domestic political fallout here. Not surprisingly, in addition to the president, the administration, other political actors are having their say here, including the Republican presidential candidates. And Donald Trump had been quiet for the first few days, but then issued midweek a rambling account of what he thought of this, declaring that Hezbollah was in fact smart and attacking Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, saying, now, he wasn't praising Hezbollah like some critics have said, but it was the kind of rambling remarks from this president who we've become accustomed to. The broadside against Netanyahu was really weird because of the timing of attacking a prime minister under pressure, which he is in a crisis, certainly seemed odd. And he blamed him for not supporting Donald Trump's attack on Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian leader of the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And he said, "I'll never forget that Bibi Netanyahu let us down." In other words, he made it in personal terms, Joe. And I would add that I think the real beef he has with Netanyahu is Netanyahu actually declared that Joe Biden had won the 2020 election. And Donald Trump has denounced that in the past. He said he was very early, like earlier than most. I haven't spoken to him since. Expletive deleted him, he told an Axios reporter. So I think that's the basis of the grievance, which doesn't make, which I think is typical of Trump, I guess, but is really unnecessary and strange in somebody who wants to be president again.
It's always so personal with him and always so inward focused. And we see here what a liability that is if you have someone you are contemplating putting forward as a presidential candidate again. Because I get it. People don't need to send us angry emails about Trump did notch a bunch of successes in the Middle East that were very concrete when he was in office. The maximum pressure campaign on Iran was pretty successful, reversing the Obama-era nuclear deal, the strike on Soleimani, the Abraham Accords, which started normalizing Israel's relationships with its neighbors. Those are all concrete victories. The problem is, if you are going to be a president, you have to have a certain capacity for looking beyond yourself. You have to say that the national interest is greater than my personal sense of pique at a foreign leader who might have irritated me with something that he said amiss when I sat next to him at a dinner or some, if he didn't congratulate me fulsomely enough after an election, or he didn't pretend that I won an election that I lost. You can't do that. America's interests in the region are bigger than any one presidential candidate's ego. And I think that Republicans in the primary and then voters at large in the general election, part of what they do need to be thinking about is who is the candidate who in a crisis is able to subsume whatever personal feelings they have, on a personal level about foreign leaders and understand what is America's interest in a situation and how can I, as the president, advance that.
Elliot, the other candidates have criticized. Some of them have criticized Donald Trump's remarks. Ron DeSantis did. Mike Pence did. I think Chris Christie did. Maybe even others that I missed have. And I think Trump was somewhat recognized that maybe he made a mistake because he issued a Truth Social, I guess you could call it a screed, in which he denounced Biden as the source of all the problems Israel is having and touted his record in office, some of which Joe laid out. And I think he may understand, the campaign may understand this hurt him a bit.
Yeah, I think support for Israel, especially when it's facing this kind of jihadist attack, is something that unites the Republican Party. And that was made clear to him, I'm sure not just from the other presidential candidates, but from the voters on whom he is relying. On the other side of the aisle, it becomes a little more complicated because there is a very vocal left that was sort of pledging solidarity with Palestinian resistance, so-called, in the immediate aftermath of this attack. Now, they were condemned by the responsible people in the Democratic Party, and that's good. But I think you'll hear from more Democrats as this goes on, things about Israel punishing Gaza and so forth, targeting civilians, and neither of these are true. Of course, Israel is not punishing Gaza. Israel is defending 9 million of its own citizens. And I think it's been made abundantly clear that they can't live in safety with Hamas running the show next door. Israel does not target civilians. And so you'll see these sorts of threats to American resolve on this issue, occasionally coming from the right, coming from the left, certainly. And it's up to people who know better and who are looking out for U.S. interests and what is right in the world to sort of make the case as this goes on, why the U.S. is standing by Israel.
All right, gentlemen, we'll leave it at there for today. Thank you both for coming in, and thank our listeners as usual. We are here every day on Potomac Watch, Monday through Friday. So thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week as we follow this turmoil in the Middle East and American domestic politics. Thanks for listening.